Alright, welcome to the Flag Project Part 7. This tutorial we're going to actually add the nCloth system to our flag here. We added textures and materials to our flag and our pole. Again, you don't have to use the Batman symbol. You could put whatever texture you want, any kind of material you want. I was just showing that for demonstration purposes. I'm going to turn off the ground layer and the light system in here, which I have on my own layers here. And I'm going to switch to shaded solid mode by hitting 4 and then 5 from wireframe to shaded solid. And I'm going to go to shading here and go to wireframe on shade so we can see the density of the flag here. Now the really important aspect of the flag and the pole before you beginning is to clear out the history. Again, you go to edit, delete by type, and then choose history for both of those. Then it's just important to understand the order of these things. Now I renamed this the flag and I renamed the pole. So I'm going to select the flag first, and I'm going to go in the FX menu set, which I'm here right now. You're probably working in the modeling menu set, but click in here and go to the FX menu set. Then you'll have the nCloth system available. So in order to add nCloth to the flag, all you do is click on nCloth and go down to create nCloth and click that. Then what will happen is you'll create an nCloth system and a nucleus. The nucleus is sort of a world of physics that basically reacts like, think of it like the entire world. And the nCloth system is the system that affects the flag and makes it to appear more like fabric and so forth. The way we know this works is we can rewind and hit play. Now I have only 200 frames here. I'm going to set this up a little bit higher. I'm going to go to 800 and then hit enter and then double click on my time slider here just so that I have a full timeline here, and I'll hit play and you'll immediately see the flag drop. So that means the system's working correctly. So now just hit rewind after you hit stop, and what we want to do is now attach this flag to this pole here. I'm going to do this by selecting some verts on the flag in my ortho view. So I can go to these orthographic views just by tapping spacebar. And then I'm going to go to my modeling toolkit here and click on vertices. And what I want to do is drag across a pair of verts up here. So you could choose like 4, 8, it really doesn't matter exactly how many. Let's see, I've got 8 here and rows of 3. So I'll grab those and then I'll hold the shift key and kind of do the same thing here. Just grab a row of like 3, and if it's 7 versus 8, it's not that big of a deal. And so I have those selected, and then what I'm going to do is hold the shift key and click on the pole. And once I do that, I can go to End Constraint and go down to Point to Surface Constraint. Now it's not working right now because it's kind of buggy. What's happening is when I have this in component, it made this in a component mode. Sometimes this happens. So just select your object mode and then select the flag, go back to component mode, and then try it again. Just hold shift and then click on this, and it's still doing it, which is really annoying. So let's try it one more time. Hold shift, click on it. It's still doing it. Let me try right clicking and on this object and go to object mode. There we go. Now I have now I can hold the shift key and select this after I have the vert selected. And so now what I can do is go to End Constraint and go down to Point to Surface Constraint, and now I have a dynamic constraint created, and you can see that by these little green lines here. So now when I hit rewind and then hit play, you'll see the flag is now attached. It's just behaving very strangely. For one thing, it's piercing the pole, which fabric usually doesn't do that, so we got to correct that. And so we got to go through and adjust some properties here in these little tabs. So you're going to open up the attribute editor on the right here, this little tab here, and then we'll select different things. So the first thing we're going to select is the N rigid 2, and that has to do with the pole here. And the N rigid, it'll say N rigid 1 for you if you haven't done this before. So the pole itself, we're going to enable collision. So there's a little checkbox here. By default, it's not checked. So now if we hit play, this flag will actually not collide with the pole. So it'll actually wrap around it. It won't actually physically go through it anymore. And that's based upon something that is called the solver display. If we go in here and click on collision thickness, we can see how thick that pole is. It's actually quite a bit thicker than we need to, and we can adjust the thickness here with this little slider. So I'm just gonna, I want it to be a little bit thicker than the geometry, but not quite so thick. So I think 0.015 works out for me, and I'll switch it back to off here, and then I can hit rewind and hit play again, and you'll see, it's looking pretty good. It's falling around that pole in a good way. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check the thickness and geometry of the flag itself. So we click on this dynamic or the nCloth. So we went from nRigid to nCloth now. In the nCloth system, we can click in the collisions tab here. So if your tabs are closed here, you can open up the collision tab. And in here, we're going to check under solver display. Again, it's set to off. Choose collision thickness, and then you can rotate. And you can see it's a little bit thick. Think of this right now almost like a sheet of plexiglass. We want it to be a little bit thinner, almost like fabric. So the thickness here, I'm going to switch from 0.05 to maybe 0.02. And that looks a little better in my eye. The next thing we're going to have to check for the flag is, if we click in here, is the self-collision thickness. And what this is, basically, since this flag is dynamic and it bends and wraps, if we don't have these little spheres big enough, they'll actually pierce through the geometry, pierce through itself. And so we want to adjust that thickness. So the self-collide scale here, we can adjust and just drag it. Now we don't want it to be too thick. We want it to be a little bit thinner than, we don't want them to be touching necessarily. But we don't want a sphere to pass through in between each one. So I'm thinking like 5.5 actually looks pretty good for me here. And that gives me enough thickness, but also allows some space in between. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to turn this guy off. So that's pretty much all you have to do inside the nCloth system for right now. Except we may want to change a few more properties under the dynamic properties here. One thing that's happening is there's this crazy drooping that happens, right? That stretch. And that is based on the stretch resistance and its compression resistance. So we can change these values and increase them quite a bit. I'm going to type in a crazy value like 400 and 400 for both. And let's see what happens now. So we'll hit play, and you can see it's starting to behave a little bit more like a flag now, just by typing in 400 by 400. So now it's dropping okay. Now let's change some other things. Let's go to the nucleus. The nucleus again is like the world attributes of the actual physics of the world. And we don't need the transform nodes, but under gravity and wind, you'll see here 9.8 is a value for gravity, and that's actually the gravity of the Earth. This is actually a mathematical fraction based upon the real gravity of the Earth. You can actually put in different values. If we put in like 1.3, for example, I think it is. It might be like 1.2, but it's like the gravity of the moon. And you can see it's kind of floaty now. It's not dropping quite as fast, so but we'll bring it back to 9.8. It's just kind of fun to know that this is real world physics in this system here. The air density is another thing. This one value is based upon the atmosphere of the Earth right now. Now, right now, there's no speed, any kind of wind speed at all. So it's set to 0. So let's add a value in here. Let's type in maybe 5. And we'll hit play. And we'll start to see the flag blow a little bit. And it looks okay. So what I'm going to do is rewind it, and let's increase that speed a little bit. Maybe a factor of 15. And let's hit play and see what happens now. Now you can start to see the wind kind of blowing it around, and it's starting to behave much more like a flag. Now you could go kind of crazy with this. You could go, really high just to see what that looks like. Let's see a value of 50. Hit rewind and hit play. And now we got, like a really powerful wind, thrusting across. Kind of ridiculous, almost like hurricane wind. So I'm thinking, 15 wasn't too bad. I might go like 18, try that out and see what that looks like. So with nCloth systems, you do a lot of testing, and 18 looks pretty good. I like that way that flows and the wrapping that happens there. That looks really good. Now, if we want it to be a little bit more accurate, we can increase what are known as the solver steps. So it's this, right now it's set to 3 here. If I drag the slider to the left to max it out, what it's going to do is it's going to give me a little bit more of a real world kind of effect in terms of the flapping of the cloth. And sometimes it'll be a little bit slower render, but it'll be a little more accurate. So I could always divide that in half, maybe try 10 steps and see some comfortable in between. And 10 doesn't look too bad, but flag system looks pretty good. I'm starting to like the way it looks now. Now it's faceted right now, so if I hit number 3, I'll get a smooth preview of it. Let's turn off the shading here, the wireframe unshaded. You can actually see the smoothness of the flag now as it wraps around. Now, if I change it to 6, you'll actually see the Batman symbol here. So it'll be really slow, but I can play it and you can kind of see the texture actually fold and compress and lay out and bend around, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it. At this point, I could come in and turn on my ground plane, turn on my pyramid, and set up the ability to create some cool renders with the Batman flag. So I think this will pretty much conclude everything. We covered render settings before. I'll just do that really fast. Open up your render settings tab here, the gear icon, and I would change it to 2048, which is a 2K render by 1024. So this is the size I like to have the renders turn in. And then in terms of the Arnold renderer here, you could up the camera samples to say 5, and then the diffuse to 3, and the spec to 3 to get a little higher res. Then there's some other little tests. The one thing that I forgot was, let me click on the flag and hit the F key on it. This material, if I go back to the attribute editor, here we go. Flag 22 is the material. And what I want to do is check, it is pretty high specular. So it has a shininess. So if I want this to be more flag-like, I'd reduce the specular value and maybe increase the roughness a little bit. And that will give me more of a cloth kind of quality. So if I was aiming for a render and like this, for example, and I'll hit play a little bit to get the flag kind of moving and maybe stop there. And then we'll add a little window for the preview here. And yeah, I'll go ahead and pause while this renders and we'll take a quick look and see how this looks. So one thing I forgot to do was to turn on my light system so the angle changed a little bit. And but the renders here, now I don't have the sky rendering in my scene here because I've turned that off. But if you want the sky to be rendered, click on your sky dome and under the attribute editor, let me collapse this. Here's where you would do it. We'd go down to where it says camera, and I have this turned to 0. So if you bring that back up to 1, you'll actually see the sky in your scene here. The reason why I don't want the sky in there is because I want to replace it with my own sky. So in Photoshop, I composite it. I brought in HDRI, which I got from this cool site, HDR Haven, which are free HDRIs you can use for whatever purpose you want, for commercial and for personal use. And they go up to 16K, which is really good, huge images. So this is the 8K file I have here. And I had a little adjustment to it, but it looks pretty good overall. So I'm pretty happy the way the render came out. So basically what you want to do is create at least 4 of these renders for your final project in your scene here. And that will finish it up. So basically this concludes the tutorial series for the flag project. We've covered how to create first our own sort of ancient pyramid, our land structure here with some cool textures, and then of course our flag system, which we added a texture to and material, and then we added the nCloth system and we did some testing on it to try it out. So that's it. Until next time, see you soon in Autodesk Maya. Cheers.